Police killing of George Floyd has sparked nationwide protests over policing. Amid these protests, a rallying cry for some has gained traction: defund the police. You might think defunding the police means stripping police of all funding and eliminating police departments completely, but it doesn't.
This is not about flipping some magic switch and poof, all police just disappear. And this is about an evidence-based driven strategy to produce better public safety by trying to get the police out of those things that they're not really properly equipped to handle. They shouldn't be responding to mental health crisis calls. They shouldn't be responsible for discipline in our schools. They shouldn't be harassing the homeless.
Activists argue that if the movement is adopted, it will lead to safer communities because the millions of dollars spent on police departments will be directed to community programs.
And the millions and billions and trillions that we waste on the military and the police need to go to our communities. We need housing, we need education, we need health care.
So there's an assumption that the only possible tool we can use to keep people safe is armed police patrolling our neighborhoods. When we look at wealthy communities, though, we don't see a lot of armed police because those communities have access to high-quality health care to deal with problems of mental health crises and substance abuse. But we've turned all those problems over to police in poor and non-white communities. Those communities don't want more police. They want high-quality, medically based drug treatment programs. They want high-quality mental health services for their family members.
Critics of defund the police aren't so sure that reallocating funds is a good idea.
The president is appalled by the defund the police movement.
There won't be defunding. There won't be dismantling of our police.
This is rolling back the protective layers that protect Americans in their homes and in their places of business.
In your experience, every time someone calls 911, would a therapist or a medic be sufficient, or sometimes do people need cops?
I'm quite unclear how a medic is going to help with an armed subject who's assaulting his wife in a domestic violence situation or elsewhere.
Many critics' first response to abolishing the police is, but how will I be safe if I have a real emergency and need the police?
There's a lot of misconception about what we're talking about here. Police exist. We're talking about pulling as many things away from them as we can show could be handled in a better way. And the goal of this movement is to prevent harms from happening in the first place. Well, I think we have a real political crisis in our country where there's a division between people who think that it's actually possible to make the lives of the poor and the isolated better, and those people who think that the only thing those people understand is the threat of guns and putting them in cages. And at root, I think that latter philosophy about life is tinged with a certain kind of racism that says that certain people just aren't capable of managing their own affairs.
Well, I think that one of the things that's really being asked for is not for policing to go away or for police to disappear, but for policing to be equitable. Black and white people have experienced policing entirely different.
As politicians have come to rely on police to address more and more problems in our society, they've given those police more military-grade hardware and told them they're waging a war on drugs and a war on gangs and a war on immigrants and a war on terror and really a war on the poor. And this military-grade equipment is not helping. It signals that the police are ever more distant from the public. It's being misused on things like no-knock drug raids in the middle of the night and the suppression of lawful First Amendment protest activity.
Politicians on both sides of the aisle have avoided committing to defunding the police.
No, I don't support defunding the police. I support conditioning federal aid to police based on whether or not they meet certain basic standards of decency and honorableness.
And it only perpetuates the problem more. We should be providing more money to training.
House leadership recently unveiled a sprawling new police reform bill called the Justice in Policing Act. And while it does a lot to financially motivate police departments, it stops short of answering calls to defund the police.
We've seen a growing number of cities in the midst of this crisis beginning to take seriously the demands to shift resources from jails, courts, and police into community identified needs. And I think we're just going to see these movements get stronger, especially as they begin the hard work of talking to their neighbors, building alternatives, and convincing the people in their communities that they have a better strategy